Hi, this is Jennetta Billhimer, and I'm here with What's All the Buzz About Homeschooling. Um, I am here with Heidi. Uh, how do you say your last name?
It's close. It's Coillot.
Coillot.
It's tough when you try and take French and make it American.
Well, it is great to have you here. Heidi is amazing. Um, she's the mother of 4 children, and her kids she's got a daughter who's 18, and then boys who are 15, 13, and 9. She stayed home with her kids almost 13 years, homeschooling on and off. And you can do that. You can figure out what's right for your child from year to year. And she says, I had to start working outside the home in 2015, and I also started school part-time. She graduated last May with an AAS. Now, what's an AAS?
So that's an Associates of Applied Science. So it's an associate's degree, but it's not an AA if you want to get really technical.
All right. And she received her license to practice as a physical therapist assistant. And she says that her 2 favorite jobs in the world are being a mom and being a PTA, and in that order.
Definitely.
So I am really excited to have you here. I know that you have a lot of information, a lot of experience to share from homeschooling over the years.
I hope so. It might be kind of old information, I guess, since I haven't done it for several years, but I really loved experimenting with different things, and I guess I should probably say that in the middle of finding certain things that didn't work, I didn't love that because I'm kind of a results-driven kind of person.
You want to know, right? And do it right the first time, don't we all?
It's been frustrating for me to muddle through things and not do it right the first time. Yeah. But actually experiencing with homeschooling, the difficulties with homeschooling, that was a really powerful tool to help me kind of chill about things and not be so perfectionist, because you're not going to destroy your child's education in a day, or even one homeschool year that let's say you follow the typical pattern that you do 9 months on and 3 months off or something like that, because a lot of homeschoolers do, so it kind of matches with their friends or extended family, things like that. But you can do it however you want, and I love that. And in those 9 months, you are not going to wreck your future 18-year-old for college or for life. Like if it's been a rough year and you end it and you're like, I'm not sure that I can chalk that up as a success. Maybe that some of the things you wanted to get out of it were not what you would call a success. But if you think of it kind of like that quote by Thomas Edison, which I'm not going to try and actually quote because I won't remember it, but something about he didn't fail 1,000 times in trying to make a light bulb. He found 1,000 ways that it wouldn't work. So you can speak something that in the moment is frustrating or disappointing, and you can learn from it, and it's all part of the package that makes whatever you end up doing work. That's what I think.
And homeschooling is just like life, and you're not going to, it's just all, it's a process, I think. You're not going to ruin your children, and I think that's one of the biggest fears is, am I just going to hold them back a whole year, and then they won't be up with their peers where everyone else is? What would you say about that? About that fear that maybe then they won't be up with everybody else.
I like that question because I have probably a pretty unique view on that. I mean, within my social circle, it's pretty unique. I don't even know that I would say I was homeschooled for the years that I was at home, because it wasn't a structured, this is the learning education part of our day. Like, I haven't studied in depth what unschooling is like. I'm sure you've heard of that. It's a very free, hands-off, child-driven focus, and they just basically learn what they want to learn, is what I understand the gist of it is.
And parents can put information out like on the table. They can do lots of different kinds of things with them, go and do things. They don't sit down with this like particular curriculum. And I know I unschool a little bit, but we have a lot, we have more structure, it's giving them information and taking them places and things like that, but it's really is pretty hands off, in a lot of ways, because the parents are trusting that the children will learn what they need to learn. And you have a unique perspective because you were homeschooled.
For lack of a better term, let's call it that.
But was it unschooling more, do you think?
In a sense, it was, because the only thing, I mean, until I got to be a teenager and there were some certain specific things that I chose to work on, the years that I was at home, the only specific thing I can tell you that I remember sitting down with my mom and learning, like her teaching me in a structured, I remember sitting down and doing this, was how to count back change, which I know sounds really random and weird, but.
So they just kind of took you out of, you were in the public school system and then they took you out? Is that how it was? Or?
I started out. My very first, we'll call it formal education outside of home, was a private school, but not in the typical sense that you think of when you hear that word. It was a one-room, no, not a one-room schoolhouse. I think it was a converted home that this man had bought, and he made it a schoolhouse. And he had one class of students, and we ranged, I was one of the youngest, and I was in my first grade year, and a typical first grade age. And one of the oldest students was my sister. I don't know if she was the oldest, but around that. And she's 7 years older than I am. So he had a typical class size, like a typical, we must have had, okay, it's probably smaller than a typical public school class now. We probably had around 15 to 20 kids, which is a lot for that kind of an age range.
Mm-hmm.
And he was principal, vice principal, teacher, lunch coordinator, with the help of parents. So it wasn't a co-op in the sense that different parents really had a strong hand in all of the facilitating education. And I use the term facilitating education specifically because it's, when it's done right, and in that school it was done right, it's not the adult saying, here's this knowledge and giving it to this child. It's not exactly like that. Facilitating education, I look at it as more of, we present and we guide, but we don't direct with an overbearing nature. Does that make sense?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And which I think a lot of homeschoolers come to realize and use that philosophy, that you don't just teach it and you don't just fill them all up with all this information, but you're there to help facilitate their education with them for what they need. And this is such a unique experience that you went through our educational system that you went through as a child, like with about 30 years ago or so.
Yeah, a little over 30 years. I'm 39 right now. And so I turned 7 during my first grade year. And, I can't even tell you if this man, his name was Bruce Campbell. He was our teacher. And I don't know that he was a trained teacher. I don't remember it. In first grade, that wasn't important to me.
And do you have to be a trained teacher? Not necessarily. I mean, not parents who care about their children can be the best. They can be wonderful, wonderful mentors and facilitators for their children.
Yeah, if we had to have all of the knowledge that our kids need, we would all be lost. And that's
daunting.
why we facilitate and give them the tools to go out there and find what they need, when they're older and they don't need as much guidance.
Because how do you even know what they're going to need? What is going to be their life missions? You can catch glimpses of it, but does anyone really know what exactly your child is going to need?
Right. I mean,
you do your best that way, but
yeah, there are those basic functional things that we need to learn. Like, yes, our kids might hate math, but that doesn't mean that if by 8 years old they haven't mastered multiplication, then the parent's a failure and the kid's a failure. That's not true.
You can learn your multiplication tables. Even as an adult, you could memorize them and you'd be okay. If it took that long.
It'll be harder as an adult.
And you would miss out on a lot in between that time when you need to have your multiplication tables. So,
right. Yeah.
For future math, but
there are so many fun ways to do it. And our teacher
learn all your math now if you wanted to too. Right.
Right. I'm trying to think. Oh, Horizon School. That's what he called it. And he had this, I assume it must have been what used to be the living room of this house. And it had carpet, and we would have group things in there. And then the hard floor area had large tables set up, and that's where we would sit and work on projects or activities or schoolwork. And the kitchen is where the older kids made hot lunch, which I wasn't thinking about it, but I imagine that must have been a cooperative effort purchased by the families of the school. I don't know. I was young enough that it didn't ever occur to me.
Mm-hmm.
It was the most cooperative thing I was ever able to be a part of. And he didn't have the money to keep it going after that year. And I have to tell you, I don't know how many years it had been going. I think my siblings might have gone a year or two before I started. But it ended after my first grade year. And I remember our last day of school just bawling, because I knew I wouldn't get to go back. But
because you loved it.
I really did. But he, even just in that one school year, this man that I have never ever talked to again, gave me just a little piece of how beautiful learning can be. And it really should have prepared me better to not have to start bumbling through things when I wanted to homeschool. But I kind of had to relearn some things that, because my specific nature is a little bit more, I want to try and over-organize and micromanage to make sure I don't miss anything.
Me too.
That makes homeschooling boring and difficult and contentious in my experience. And I had to figure out how to grow out of that. And so I kind of had to grow along with my kids, trying to figure it out and figure out what mom was trying to figure out all at the same time. And there were some years that I felt like, so I'm a pretty religious person, and I really made prayer a part of how I was going to approach this. And there were some years that I felt this is a homeschool year. And there were some years that I felt I have no idea how I'm going to do this, or it just didn't feel right. And it was mainly based for my daughter at that point, because there wasn't a whole lot of active schooling going on for her brother, because he was really young. It was kind of like, they color and draw as they're a part of it with the older sibling doing it, kind of thing. But through the years that we did it on and off, so my youngest, who's 9, is the only one that didn't get to homeschool at all, because he was preschool age when I started working outside the home. But my third child, who's 13, is the first one that I took the opportunity to teach how to read, because the other two had already been to kindergarten before I homeschooled them. So they learned to read in school with, whatever the extra help is that we do at home, but basically they were taught in school. And so my 13-year-old is the first one that I got to teach how to read, and I learned some things that, you just learn things that you never think about if you haven't done it. And it was fun. For the most part, it's not like it's all perfect and happy and rainbows and
like family life, right?
yeah, there were days when I was like, okay, I don't think that I'm going to handle this very well. And maybe there were days that there wasn't a lot of proof of school work that got done. But I can tell you that lots of education and learning happens without papers and pencils.
It does. And perhaps things that are just more important on those days that need to be learned.
Yeah, maybe
Even if it's hard that day, maybe there's some important learning going on there, having to do with interpersonal relationships, or dad's feeling really sad because of his job or something. You know, they're home and they're there with you, and you know, this and baking with you, and oh look, we forgot and things burned, and like just living normal life.
Well, yes, and that natural flow of life teaches, I think, a natural cause and effect. We learn about consequences, natural consequences, and things are so managed in public school because they have such a small ratio of teachers to students that they, I guess, feel like they have to micromanage and have all of these rules to keep things semi-orderly, that you don't have that natural flow.
I got my degree in elementary education, and a lot of what is taught throughout the whole program is how to manage the children, even more than just here are the, you know, teach them about this and this and this. It's not necessarily, I mean, there's some of that, but a lot of it is about the management and just how to manage the kids. And by the time I was done, I didn't really even want to do it anymore. And I've had to actually unlearn a lot. Not that it was, I don't know, but I've had to unlearn a lot of the things that I learned there to homeschool my children. I know. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful teachers out there. So I don't want to say anything like that. I am really grateful for teachers in the public school system who are helping children. Yes.
They graduate with these wonderful creative ideas, I'm sure, but they're unfortunately part of a system where that they don't really get to use that. I've actually asked some teachers here and there, like, so if there's a curriculum that you really like, do you get to pick what you use to teach math? No, they don't get to do stuff like that. I mean, it's not like they can't be creative at all. There are outlets for that. But some of it gets squashed a little bit in that conveyor belt system. And
all the papers to correct and everything. I have a lot of respect for teachers who are out there doing it.
They put so much time in that they don't, I mean, you can say they get paid for it because they're like paid for the whole year, but not really. And they're contributing money out of their pocket to supply things for their classrooms, which is crazy.
For books, for the bookshelves, and yeah, for their classroom.
Yeah, it's a hard to go into when you want to help educate children. Like, you know, I think I'm kind of zoning in on the young age when, you know, that we think about that starting. And it's hard. And their hands kind of get tied behind their backs a little bit. And I wouldn't even
see that working as a PTA, right? Is that what you're? Oh, no, that's physical therapist. I thought it meant like PTA.
Sorry. Yes, that's actually really funny. People would ask me, so what do you go to school for? And I'd say, oh, I'm going to PTA school. And they'd be like, there's a degree for that? And I would know that we were on two different subjects. I'm like, that's a different PTA.
Oh, that's funny.
It was a little bit sad that I finally felt like I was getting some good traction in putting together all the things that I learned. And that was about the time that I didn't get to do it anymore. But
Well, it's about the time when you figure out that your children need something different anyway. So
well, yeah, and I know
then you
families
get to do it.
for a given year, school year, they will homeschool some of their kids or one of their children, and the other ones they go to public school. Like, there is no all or nothing there. You can do what you need to for each of your kids so far. I mean, there are different state mandates that are making things a little bit more difficult here and there depending on your situation, but thus far, for the most part, you still have a lot of freedom in how you educate your children. If you get to be home with them, then usually you can choose to do that. And you don't have to have a college degree. Certain aspects of doing homeschooling with a registered homeschool student, which is completely different than just homeschooling and educating your children. Like, for them to have an actual diploma, they require that they've been registered and they can track all of this schooling that they've done. But
like if you're with a particular school, and then otherwise parents can write their own diplomas because it's your own school. So
that's true. I have a friend that did that, and far enough into it to even think about like what that was going to be like. So
there's a way to do it too. You can't just you do need to use the particular class names, and there's things to know about that. But
yeah, loopholes we have to know to play the game.
Yes, and that's a lot of what public education is about, is jumping through the hoops and playing the game. I think we all know that there's things you've got to do to get that diploma and all. And so there's that, as opposed to just being able to learn and and sit down with your kids or go places and learn things and all.
Yeah.
Doesn't all have to fit into a particular box.
They have so much more time for like the field trip aspect of schooling, of education, when you get to homeschool, because I mean, some people think homeschooling is sitting at their table and doing paperwork, and
it can be.
That's a smaller part of it. You've got activities and projects and trips. And I think co-ops are a great idea. I was never like formally a part of a co-op, but I think they're a wonderful idea, because then these kids get exposed to different learning styles, different teaching styles, different opinions, but still within an environment that is parented well.
Yes. Yes.
I like that idea. And it's hard to find that, because you usually have to find parents, a family that has a stay-at-home parent that can devote some serious time, because they have to be a teacher for a subject or two. And so that takes some real commitment to invest that time with your children. But I always tell people, some people would say, oh, wow, you have 4 kids, like it's a lot, which it's not really a lot. I'm the youngest of 6, so 4 doesn't sound like a lot to me. But I would say, well,
homeschooling 4 in 4 different subjects can be, some parents might be wondering, how do you do that? Maybe, yeah.
Well, I never had, like I said, 4 all at once, but I did do 3 all at once. And some subjects we did together, and some subjects we didn't. Like history, we would do together. We would, I really liked Story of the World, I think it was called. Really love that curriculum.
We do too.
About it and do the project and like answer questions and talk about it.
We just listened to the CDs. It was really fun.
I went hard copy, which it was really neat. So my daughter was 10-ish, I think, when we were doing that. And sometimes I would see her on her own time reading the book, like reading the accounts in the book that we, just for fun. And that was neat to see. Math.
Because she loved to learn, and you helped to help her to, you just helped her to learn how to develop that. You were helping her to develop that love of learning.
I don't know if it got killed or not. Like, I don't know, but hopefully it didn't get completely squashed. But none of
like you were facilitating that.
Yeah, none of them love school like the public school. They wouldn't say like, "Oh, I love school." It's like, yeah, we have to go to school. I don't know that I would say they hate it either. I think that some kids benefit more from one than the other, to either side. Like, there are some kids that, for whatever family dynamic it is, maybe homeschool is just not the right thing for them. And that does not mean that that parent is a failure. Like, we just have to go with the flow and do whatever is best at that time for that kid. And, you know, I still get to help my kids with their homework. Sometimes I like it, sometimes not.
That's one reason I stopped. I wanted to stop public schooling, because I was like, I could just be doing this at home in the same amount of time.
Right, and they wouldn't be spending 7 hours
with them.
plus all of that.
Yeah.
So, but I guess it gives me the opportunity to be with part of their pathway of education a little bit, and I enjoy being a part of it as much as I can.
Yeah. What would you tell parents that are overwhelmed and discouraged? Maybe they're homeschooling right now and they're feeling kind of, maybe discouraged. They're not sure that this is really working.
I've so been there. That's the first thing I would tell you, is I have been there. And sometimes it really wasn't working, and I had to learn how to change it. And it would stress me out that I was like, okay, well, if I change it, I'm going to lose ground. Try and let all of that go. Take a deep breath and maybe spend a week or two and just don't do any scheduled schooling. Just take a breather, see what you guys like to do. And if you want to be structured enough that you want them to have a certain number of specific subjects, then just take some time and see how they like to learn it. Maybe you have a kid that wants to learn math by cooking. Maybe someone wants to read the Life of Fred books. I mean, there are so many.
Math.
Yeah.
And in a really creative way.
Yeah, I would say take a step back if you're stressed and actually do nothing structured for a little while, which sounds counterproductive to that mindset if you're the type that's like, I can't lose ground. But in the long run, you won't lose ground, because if you keep doing what's stressing everybody out, you will want to quit. And so will your kids.
And you'll be losing ground that way, right?
And those are messages that are going to last far longer than the few to several weeks you might take time out to figure out what works. That's
and
really.
It might be reading on the couch together, just like reading a really great book.
Yeah,
or taking taking a break like Christmas, and then because it's awesome because you can do that and then use Christmas time to do homeschooling type of things. That you can figure out your own schedule. That's one of the beauties of homeschooling.
And I would say reach out and talk to people that have found what works for them, which won't necessarily be what works for you. But there can be some principles that you might learn that help you find what works. And it'll be a process. But if I can finally get to the point that I can figure out what was working for my family, anybody can do that, because I made it harder than it had to be for a while.
And I think that's a good point, that that you're probably doing better than you think you are. And it's probably looking the way that it really needs to be looking right now. even if we're, you know, in the trenches and it's hard to see exactly what's happening, looking back, you're like, that's why our family needed to go through that, and we learned so much that year, and it didn't look like public school, but we learned a lot.
Well, and
We needed to.
I would say it really probably shouldn't look like public school. Like, if that's really what you think it should look like, you're probably going to be miserable. Trying to reproduce that at home has not been, in my experience, good education. Because I kind of tried to do that, and it doesn't work the way that you think it's going to work.
And if you try to do that too much, it's sometimes you get to summertime and the kids are often doing their own things, and they're finally having the time where they can learn about this. They're inventing something, or they're baking something, or they're having time to play the piano, and really just, you know, flourish with that. And what if it could look like that all the time, you know? And so kind of going back to, maybe unschooling's not such a bad thing. I mean, I know I kind of use an eclectic blend, but, you know, what if that's okay? That they're learning exactly what they need to learn, each child.
Yeah, I agree. And I've probably gone on longer than I should have, but.
Well, I think it's been very insightful, so helpful.
Good.
Is there anything you'd like to say in parting, that would encourage families to just get started or to continue going forward with homeschooling?
What would I say? I would say take your time and don't be in a rush if you're at the point where you're thinking about doing it, or you know you're going to get started. Don't feel
thinking about quitting.
Yeah.
Don't be in a rush.
Either direction decision really quickly. It's okay to take time and think about it. Just because your child turned 5 and September's coming up, relax. It's okay. And if they've been doing it for a while and it feels like they're burning out, like I said earlier, I would say take some time and step back. Even if it's during the school year, don't stress about it. Take some time to step back, and then you won't be in the heat of the moment trying to figure out what to do. Because when we calm down and we're not in the midst of those tough emotions, we're going to make a better decision. And talk about it with your family. Don't make an executive decision for your kids. I mean, even your little ones will tell you, I want to know about rockets. I want to learn about horses, whatever it is. They will tell you things that will help guide you in that path. You don't have to figure it out all by yourself.
Yeah, I think that they can be one of the best helps in knowing what to do with them, because they've come, I believe that they've come programmed with what they're going to do, and they're going to be interested in learning about what they are going to do in their lives. There's a what would you call it, like a what is it called, pilot? They're piloted already towards what they're
I see.
Yeah.
Each person's going to have a different path for their journey, but that doesn't mean that we can't help facilitate all of them.
Right.
Started on their way.
Yes. Well, so many important things and interesting topics that you've brought to the table here today, Heidi. I really feel like it's been this is a wonderful video that's going to help a lot of people, and so everyone, feel free to share these videos and get them out there so that people can that they'll have a chance to explore this and explore homeschooling and this topic. So thank you so much, Heidi, for being here, and thank you for taking the time and helping us to like really explore these topics.
Thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. It was fun.
Yeah, and can anyone contact you and ask you more?
Sure.
And are you available to talk to them?
Yep,
Answer
I'm
questions?
happy to. Like I said, I'm not up on like new ideas probably that are out there because I'm not in the thick of it, but yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure that you have my number and you can pass it to anyone that's curious.
That sounds great. And yes, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much, Heidi.
Thank you. It was great. Have a good day.
You too.